The Tzorans were an ancient and proud species, their civilization spanning thousands of star systems. They believed themselves unmatched in their understanding of dominance and war. From their towering citadels and fleets of warships, they judged other species by a single metric: courage in the face of annihilation. To them, courage meant standing one's ground, no matter the odds, and fighting until the bitter end. Anything less was a display of cowardice. When the Tzorans discovered humanity, they dismissed Earth as an insignificant blue dot. Their initial surveillance reports painted humans as erratic, emotional, and profoundly fragile. What fascinated the Tzorans most was the human propensity for fear. They observed Earth's entertainment, movies, books, and urban legends, and found it laughable. Why would a species frighten itself for amusement? The concept was incomprehensible. The Tzorans catalogued countless horror stories, but one recurring figure stood out: the Boogeyman. To the Tzorans, it was a pathetic caricature. Humans, it seemed, had invented an imaginary monster to scare their children into obedience. It epitomized what they saw as humanity's deep-seated cowardice, a species so dominated by fear that they conjured threats even when none existed. Their contempt grew as they reviewed Earth's history. While humanity had its share of wars and revolutions, its tendency to negotiate and retreat when faced with overwhelming odds disgusted the Tzorans. They viewed acts of diplomacy and compromise as weakness, not strategy. When humanity avoided direct confrontations or chose to de-escalate conflicts, the Tzorans saw only cowardice, not prudence. Armed with this knowledge, the Tzorans decided that humanity was ripe for conquest. Earth was resource-rich and strategically located near several trade routes. The Tzorans anticipated minimal resistance, expecting humans to crumble at the first display of superior force. Conquest wasn't just practical, it was almost a rite of passage for their species. Subjugating a world as timid as Earth would solidify their dominance in the galaxy. The invasion plan was straightforward. Their fleet, consisting of gargantuan dreadnoughts and nimble strike crafts, would descend upon Earth in an overwhelming show of power. The Tzorans would broadcast their demands globally, forcing humanity to kneel. No prolonged battles. No unnecessary destruction. Just swift, unquestionable domination. On the eve of the invasion, Tzoran commanders gloated as they prepared their forces. They shared stories about the humans' ridiculous fears, joking about how the Boogeyman might rise to save Earth. Their laughter echoed through the grand halls of their flagship. "They'll probably surrender before we even land," one commander sneered. "Indeed," replied another. "And if not, we'll see how brave they are once their cities fall." The fleet departed with confidence unmatched, their weapons primed and shields impenetrable. They expected fear, submission, and a quick victory. After all, what could such a cowardly species possibly do to resist the might of the Tzoran Empire? In their arrogance, they had overlooked one critical truth about humanity. Fear, when harnessed, becomes a weapon far more powerful than courage. The Tzorans made their presence known with the kind of spectacle that had subjugated countless other species. Their massive ships emerged from hyperspace, blotting out the sky above Earth's major cities. The message came soon after, a broadcast in every language, delivered with unshakable confidence. "Humans of Earth, we are the Tzorans, your new rulers. Resistance is futile. Surrender your planet, your resources, and your obedience, and we will spare your lives. Defiance will bring annihilation. You have 24 hours to comply." The message was met with a global wave of panic. News channels buzzed with speculation, while social media exploded with fear and outrage. In government bunkers around the world, leaders scrambled to form a response. Military commanders assessed their options, though they knew the truth: Earth's forces were no match for such advanced technology. Attempts to negotiate were made almost immediately. Humanity's leaders pleaded for mercy, offering resources and alliances in exchange for coexistence. The Tzorans, watching these efforts, only saw validation of their earlier conclusions. "They grovel before us already," one Tzoran officer remarked, amusement clear in his voice. Still, Earth did not surrender outright. A coalition of nations decided to test the invaders' strength, hoping for some chance to delay or deter them. The largest military forces on the planet mobilized, sending squadrons of jets, tanks, and missiles to confront the invaders. It was a bold move, but one doomed to failure. The Tzorans didn't just defeat Earth's defenses, they dismantled them with surgical precision. Missiles were intercepted mid-air, jets were downed before they could fire a single shot, and ground forces were scattered like insects beneath the weight of the invaders' superior firepower. Within hours, humanity's bravest efforts lay in ruins. To the Tzorans, it was laughable. Their broadcasts turned from threats to taunts. Is this the best Earth has to offer? Your courage crumbles like your cities. The display was meant to break humanity's spirit, to ensure the next phase of their occupation would proceed unchallenged. But not all humans were cowed by the display. In small towns and isolated regions, where the Tzorans' presence was less overwhelming, resistance began to form. In America, particularly, whispers started spreading among the populace. While many civilians were terrified, others began to speak of something far darker. "The Boogeyman will get them," one man said in hushed tones, and the phrase was echoed across bars, kitchens, and hastily built shelters. Stories began circulating of alien patrols in rural America vanishing without explanation. Grainy footage showed shadows moving through the night, followed by bursts of panic among the Tzorans soldiers. The aliens, dismissive of the warnings at first, began to take notice. Reports filtered in of sabotage, ambushes, and inexplicable losses. Soldiers spoke of hearing guttural whispers in the dark, of traps so meticulously laid that escape was impossible. "It's a trick," Tzoran commanders said, but even they couldn't fully dismiss the fear growing among their ranks. What had started as ridicule now carried the weight of something far more unsettling. To the Tzorans, it seemed humanity had conjured its own nightmare into reality. The first disappearance occurred in a quiet, unassuming stretch of rural America. A Tzoran scouting unit, assigned to map the area and establish control, failed to report back. Their last transmission was garbled, distorted audio punctuated by the sound of static, heavy breathing, and what might have been muffled screams. Surveillance drones sent to locate them returned only fragmented images: overturned vehicles, weapons scattered as though abandoned in a panic, and ominous scorch marks on the ground. The Tzorans dismissed it as an isolated incident. Earth was chaotic, after all, and the humans were prone to sporadic acts of resistance. But when a second patrol disappeared just days later, and then a third, the matter could no longer be ignored. Reports from surviving troops grew more bizarre with each encounter. Soldiers spoke of an unseen force, something faster than their sensors could detect, something that seemed to anticipate their every move. They described hearing low, guttural whispers in the darkness, their own fear amplified until it became unbearable. Among the humans in the area, the whispers had a name: the Boogeyman. To the locals, it was more than a myth now. It was a weapon, wielded with precision and ruthlessness. Stories of the Boogeyman were deliberately spread among alien troops, blending truth with fiction to create an overwhelming sense of dread. Some of these tales were embellished by human resistance fighters, but many were grounded in reality. The Boogeyman was no singular entity. It was a carefully orchestrated effort, led by a former Special Forces operative named Cole Parker. Parker had watched the Tzoran invasion tear through Earth's defenses, and while others despaired, he recognized an opportunity. He understood that the Tzorans' arrogance could be turned against them. If they believed humanity was weak, then fear could be the key to their undoing. Parker and his team used every resource at their disposal to create the illusion of an unstoppable force. Advanced camouflage and stealth technology allowed them to blend into their environment, striking from the shadows and vanishing without a trace. They laid traps that exploited the Tzorans' reliance on their technology, jamming sensors, disabling communications, and turning their own weapons against them. Their attacks were quick, brutal, and disorienting, leaving no survivors to explain what had happened. But it wasn't just the tactics that worked, it was the psychology. Parker knew the Tzorans viewed humans as cowards, and he exploited that belief mercilessly. Every attack was accompanied by signs of something inhuman: deep claw marks gouged into steel, eerie symbols painted in blood-like substances, and recorded sounds of guttural growls played through hacked communication devices. To the Tzorans, it seemed impossible that mere humans could be responsible. As the legend of the Boogeyman grew, so did the fear among the Tzoran troops. They began to see shadows where none existed, to flinch at the smallest sound. Patrols doubled in size, yet their losses only increased. Commanders tried to maintain order, but even they were not immune to the growing paranoia. The invincible Tzoran Empire had begun to fracture, all because of a nightmare they couldn't comprehend. The cracks in the Tzoran invasion force had become impossible to ignore. Reports of desertion trickled in daily, as soldiers abandoned their posts, unwilling to face an enemy they couldn't see. Commanders issued orders to root out the resistance, but the Boogeyman seemed to strike wherever their forces were weakest, always one step ahead. Panic was spreading through the ranks, and with it, mistakes. Patrols ventured into forests and towns only to find themselves ambushed by carefully laid traps. Explosives hidden in abandoned vehicles, decoys that lured them into kill zones, and hacked drones that turned their own reconnaissance against them became routine. Every failure was punctuated by eerie symbols carved into walls or broadcasted messages mimicking their own distress calls. It was as though the Boogeyman was everywhere at once, an omnipresent predator that hunted them with surgical precision. At the heart of this chaos, Parker's team remained unseen, their numbers small but their impact devastating. Their greatest weapon wasn't their firepower but the mythology they had built. The Tzorans, once confident and unshakable, were now prisoners of their own fear. Soldiers began refusing to patrol at night. Some reported seeing glowing eyes in the darkness. Others claimed to hear whispers even when their comms were offline. The tipping point came when Parker targeted the Tzoran flagship itself. The massive ship hovered in low orbit, its defenses considered impenetrable. Yet, Parker had studied its vulnerabilities, noting the over-reliance on automated systems and the gaps in its security protocols. Using stolen Tzoran tech, his team infiltrated the ship's supply chain, planting devices that would disrupt its systems. The attack came without warning. Alarms blared as entire sections of the flagship went dark. Power surges fried critical systems, leaving the ship vulnerable. Parker's team struck from within, sabotaging key infrastructure and planting explosives in vital areas. To the Tzorans on board, it felt like the Boogeyman had finally come for them. The flagship's commander, once so assured of their dominance, was reduced to frantic shouting as his crew succumbed to panic. The attackers were invisible, their actions precise and methodical. Explosions rocked the ship, and in their wake, cryptic messages appeared on every monitor: "Fear the dark." The commander's final order to retreat came too late. The flagship was consumed in a fiery blast, a spectacle visible from the surface of the planet. The destruction of the flagship marked the turning point of the invasion. The remaining Tzoran forces, already fractured and demoralized, retreated in disarray. Their leaders issued a decree: Earth was to be classified as off-limits, its inhabitants deemed strategically unpredictable and too dangerous to engage. As the Tzoran fleet disappeared into the void, humanity stood victorious, though battered and changed. The Boogeyman became a symbol of resilience and defiance, its legend immortalized in whispers and stories passed from generation to generation. Earth had shown the galaxy that courage wasn't always loud or visible. Sometimes, it was the quiet resolve to strike fear into those who thought themselves untouchable.